Are you on the fertility journey and you feel like something is not quite clicking? Join me this week as I sit down and have an awesome conversation with Urvi Shah. We take a look at the energetics of getting pregnant and how the soul and the body wisdom are a critical part. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an Eastern medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your menstrual health, offering period solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I am so excited for today's guest, Urvi Shah, who is a mindfulness spiritual healer for moms. Welcome to the show, Urvi.
Thank you so much, Adrienne, for having me here today.
So I clicked with you. So Urvi and I did a podcast on her show a little while back, and I'll have her introduce her beautiful work in just a second. And we totally clicked on. So I just knew that she was going to be an awesome fit for Reproductive Rebel. So I'm so excited to have you here today. Can you share with everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to thank you first for inviting me here. I know this is going to be an amazing episode because we clicked the last time we talked on my podcast. So I'm
Yeah, we
really
did.
excited for today's me. I am certified in mindfulness. So I'm a certified mindfulness teacher, which means that I teach meditation, breath work, EFT tapping, other modalities, and also a spiritual healer, which means that I have spiritual gifts in healing that I provide as well. And I kind of blend the healing, certified coach as well. I kind of blend both of those together. And for me, it's about the continuous journey of motherhood. So from fertility to postpartum. And a lot of that is because of myself. And so my own journey, and I know we'll get into this, but my own journey, I was seeking people to help me and support me throughout the journey. I was seeking people to help me and support me throughout the journey. And it was very much like, oh, well, I'm going through my fertility or infertility journey. I need somebody for this. And it wasn't like this continuous thing. And so what's kind of different in my practice is like I like to meet women wherever they are in their journey. And it's like I want to be there throughout the whole thing because it's not like you're going through fertility and then we're done. Like there's a lot of stuff. And when we work on inner work, our inner self, our shadows, everything that's inside of us that might be dealing with or coming in the way of our journey with fertility, it's a continuous journey. It like never stops. Like so, and I always say this, like your spiritual journey on yourself, your spiritual transformation is a continuous journey of life. Like it's not like I'm going to work on this one thing and I'm done with it. I move on to the next thing. No, it's like it's a spiral. So you keep going through it through life and you keep working on it. And I want to be there with you to support you throughout that whole journey. And so a lot of my teachings and a lot of you throughout that whole journey. And so a lot of my teachings and a lot of my healing work comes from things that I've tried for myself throughout my own journey and being that pillar for other women of like, okay, I know what you're going through because I've been through it myself and helping you and supporting you and giving you the resources through the whole journey.
I love that. And what you said is so true, is the fact that some of our best work comes out of the paths that we walk and we find where the holes are in the services that we're receiving, the places that, maybe are right. Like so many people think, oh, I'm struggling with getting pregnant. There has to be something wrong with me. And I'm using that in air quotes because there like fundamentally has to be something wrong as to why this isn't happening. Well, sometimes it's because we haven't worked on our container soul. And
Mhm.
so I think what you do is absolutely beautiful, not only because you're really diving into some of these areas that we don't talk and shine nearly enough light on, which is the whole reason why I was like, oh, you have to be on the show. But the other part of it too is the fact that you're looking at the whole continuum. Because in our Western culture, we really don't hold mom on the other end of this process in all of the ways that she needs. So it's so beautiful that what you're doing is literally preconception all the way through this transformation, and especially for first time moms, where through this transformation, and especially for first time moms, where they step into matrescence. And this
Mhm.
is a completely new chapter. You are a new person.
Mhm.
And to be held and supported in that way is so nourishing on so many levels.
Absolutely, and I always say that.
Nourishing on so many levels.
Absolutely, and I always say that motherhood starts from the minute that you decide that you wanna be a mom. So the second that thought pops in your head, you're now holding the energy of becoming a mom, right? And if we think about anything else that we're trying to manifest in our life, like, you have to be equal energy for that thing to come into your life. And it's the same thing with motherhood. So the second that thought pops in your head, you have to look at your life and be like, okay, like, where am I in my life? What am I doing? Can I be open to receiving, like you said, the soul of this baby to come in me energetically? And I to be a mom. Let's like check your cycles all the time, like every month meeting. But there's more to that, like, and I found that through my journey because I was doing everything. I was checking my cycles every month. I had a stupid spreadsheet, which I don't recommend anybody to do this, but I had a spreadsheet that I would track what days I was fertile, and I had that ovulation kit that would like track like, okay, like this is like your day. And then I would go to my husband and be like, okay, today's the day. And it causes a lot of stress. But like it's like I was so into that I was forgetting everything else in my life. Like, energetically, was I ready to carry the baby? Was else in my life? Like, energetically, was I ready to carry the baby? Was I ready to even be a mom? Because being a mom is so much more than just taking care of the baby, nurturing the baby. It's also you're going through a transformation yourself as well. And so a lot of that part is not talked about. And I feel like that's actually, and so a lot of that part is not talked about. And I feel like that's actually what pushed me into becoming somebody that wants to support moms and teach them along the journey. From the second that you have the thought of like, I want to be a mom, it's like, okay, let's do this. Let's look at your energy. Let's look at your mindset. Let's see what we can shift.
I love that. I love one of my clients who is, I don't want to say she's frustrated. She's getting there in terms of the fact that like she just wants to start the trying part now.
Hmm.
And I said, honey, it's important to maintain your relationship with your partner. It's
Hmm.
important to maintain your easy. Anybody who is listening to this who has been on their fertility journey for, any length of time, but I'm thinking about this more in like that 6 months or more, right? Because a lot of people get into like their first, second, or third try and they're like, oh, I can't believe this wasn't as easy as they made it sound like it was going to be in health try. And they're like, oh, I can't believe this wasn't as easy as they made it sound like it was going to be in health class. Like, they make you sound like somebody could look at you across the room and get you pregnant, which is why they want you on birth control, right? But, like, then when you
Yes.
actually start trying, you're like, "Wow, this isn't quite as easy as I thought this was going to be." Now,
Yeah.
some people, "Wow, this isn't quite as easy as I thought this was going to be." Now,
Yeah.
some people are lucky and they get it first try, and that happens for a whole variety of reasons, right? But when you've been on this journey for a little while and you've been trying and you've been tracking and you've been watching your mucus and you've been taking the LH test, or maybe you're using it, you've been tracking and you've been watching your mucus and you've been taking the LH test, or maybe you're using an Anito or whatever it is that you're using for tracking, it gets laborious, it gets very
Mhm.
scientific. And because I practice from a Chinese medicine standpoint, I always in Chinese medicine, there's this understanding of the heavenly mandate that heaven and earth come together to create humanity. That is an energetic chemical exchange that happens. And when you're not feeling connected with your partner, it's hard for alchemy to take place. Like there's this energy. And even when people use things like IVF, you can still foster that connection. So even when fertilization is not taking place inside of your body for whatever the reason, there's still an energetic component to all of that.
Yeah.
And it's so incredibly easy firsthand, as well as seeing this with clients, is it's really hard to lose sight and lose touch with that emotional and spiritual connection, that energetic connection that you have with your partner, because it becomes so, "Oh, it's time now, let's try." Like,
Yeah.
and you get, "Let's try." Like,
Yeah.
and you get so lost in the numbers and the tracking and the micromanagement. Like, I'm guilty of that. Like, I totally get it. Like, it wasn't until I literally threw out my temp drop and was like, "I can't track this anymore. Can't track this anymore." And I'm like, "Hey, honey, like my fertile window's coming. Let's make plans to go on date and do things that are fun." Right? And when we looked at it that way, then the magic finally happened. But it was like I had to get out of, and it was hard as a practitioner to get out of that head. Oh, is my cervical mucus right? And we become very laser focused on that part.
Yeah.
So the fact that you dive into and work with the spiritual aspect, I'm so excited to have your voice shared on this program, because it's something that we don't look at nearly enough.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And
Enough.
mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And I always say spirituality, if you look at the life wheel has all the components of our life, right? And so this, I feel like spirituality is at the center, right? And we sometimes don't understand what spirituality really is and what spirituality really is, because it gets meshed in with religion. And a lot of people are like, I'm not religious. I don't believe in religion. I don't want to go to church or temple or whatever. But spirituality is more than religion. Religion is a component of spirituality, but spirituality is more. And spirituality is really about you being connected to you finding that back, you coming back to that, and you knowing that you're living this human life through your spirit. Like you're having a human experience, but there's more to your human experience. It's your spirit that brought you here to be in this human experience. And everything that you're going through is something that you might have maybe agreed on. Maybe it's a contract through. It's part of this experience, good or bad. We sometimes get caught up with like a lot of things, but I'm not going to go down that spiritual hole. I wanted to kind of talk about my journey
Yeah.
of where I started. So I'm actually writing a book right
Oh,
now about my journey. And so it was supposed to already launch by June, but taking some time, but I think it'll still launch this year. But the book really goes into like my whole journey and like the conversations that I had with Source throughout my journey, because it was so difficult and like really that spiritual component. But I started my journey with fertility. So the day I thought that I wanted to started my journey with fertility. So the day I thought that I wanted to become a mom. And the journey from that day to when I became pregnant was 8 years. So it was an 8 year long journey. I had a condition called vaginismus. So vaginismus is, for those that don't know, is when the pelvic floor really tightens up. And it's like, this is, for those that don't know, is when the pelvic floor really tightens up. And it's like, there's a mind body component to it, I feel, where there's a lot of fear, trauma that's trapped, and like you just don't allow anything to penetrate through your vagina. And so obviously having sex was very difficult for me. Going to the gyno, obviously having sex was very difficult for me. Going to the gyno was very difficult. Anything with down there was very difficult for me. So like getting through that was really hard. And so I always knew that I had pain, because when I was 13 or like 12, 13, my mom was like, try using tampons. And I'm like, Mom, it hurts. I don't know why it hurts, but it hurts. And she's like, okay, maybe that's normal. Like, whatever. I wasn't having sex at that time. So she's like, it's probably fine. Like, it probably hurts. And as I grew older and into adulthood, and I became more sexually active, like sex was really painful for me. And I would go to doctors and I would ask, like, well, to articulate. And I never knew I had this condition. I think it took like 4 years for somebody to tell me that I had this condition called vaginismus. And at that point, I was already married. A year or so after my marriage, me and my husband sat down. I was like, I really want to become a mom. I was about 30 at that time, 30, 31. I didn't decide and be a mom because I didn't want to like change diapers at that age. And so like I was like, let's try now. It might take a few years. And that's when I realized I had this thing called vaginismus. And it was like, okay, well, how do we have a baby? And so I felt very defeated. I was like, I'm probably not going to have a baby. Maybe we'll have to do something else. Maybe we'll get a surrogate, or if that's not possible, we'll have to do something else. Maybe we'll get a surrogate, or if that's not possible, maybe we'll have like an adoption. And I was like going through all this in my head. And like, I remember I was like so depressed over this because I was like, I can't carry my own baby. And that's all I wanted to do. But at that point, like I also baby, and that's all I wanted to do. But at that point, like I also was told that if I go to pelvic floor therapist, it might help. And I was just so scared with everything that I had been through and so traumatized that I just wasn't ready to do that. And so it took me about a year before I found a pelvic floor therapist that I felt comfortable going to. And she really year before I found a pelvic floor therapist that I felt comfortable going to. And she really opened up space for me in the sense of like, yes, we were doing all the physical stuff, but like she gave me meditations to do. She gave me like breathing exercises to do. She would tell me to like place my hands on my womb and like and practice it in the way that she was speaking of. And I was very intrigued by it. So I always say like my journey with healing vaginismus was also where I started to move forward in my spiritual journey as well, like my spiritual transformation. I feel like my first like transformation fully into my spiritual journey happened through vaginismus. Like, and more than just this body, like there's something else. I started to connect with my soul a lot more and lead from that place a lot more. So then I went through that. And then I started that stupid spreadsheet that I was talking about earlier. But then I was like, all right, well, then my doctor's like, let me need to like see what your ovulation cycle is and all that stuff. And so we can just like, let me need to like see what your ovulation cycle is and all that stuff. And so we can figure out like when you can, and she's like, try for 6 months. And so my husband at that time was traveling a lot for work. So like 6 months, like he would be there, he wouldn't, and like we would miss the windows. And so like 6 months turned to a year, turned into 2 years. And then I started to get, and so like 6 months turned to a year, turned into 2 years. And then I started to get very frustrated with the whole process. I mean, and so was he, like you were saying, like we were just really stressed, like,
Mhm.
because it was just like I was looking at the data and I was like, I'm never getting pregnant because he's never around during my fertile windows, or like if he's around, he's tired and he's stressed. And it would just cause me stress. And it would just cause a lot of like little arguments between us that I wasn't happy with. And like you were saying, I started to think about, okay, well, what's most important is that I build an environment, or we build an environment that we are comfortable calling a baby in. Like I wouldn't want to like be bickering with trying. And at that point we had thought, okay, well, we've been trying for a little bit and it's not working. So maybe we go and look at other fertility treatments. And at that point, this is like 6 or 7 years in my fertility journey now. I was kind of like, I don't want to do IVF. It's not things. I was very, very, very against it. And I kept telling myself, like, if God wants me to get pregnant, it's not through IVF. Like, why would God want me to get pregnant through IVF? Like, no, like it probably has to happen naturally, right? Like, this is also a very limiting belief that I had to get over. And I remember sitting in a meditation and I kept hearing, and I remember sitting in a meditation and I kept hearing, like, if it exists through me, right? And so if the option of IVF is there, it's there because I put it there. Like, it wouldn't be there if I didn't put it there. And so I was like, what does that mean? It wouldn't be there if I didn't put it there. And so I was like, what does that mean? And so I kept hearing, like, there's so many different ways that you can become a mom. Don't try to close the door on one if it's opening up for you. And so I was like, okay, let me explore it. And so I started exploring it. We found a IVF clinic, and and the way that the universe would have it, I remember saying to the universe, well, if I go through IVF, I want it to be as pain-free as possible. And I found this clinic called Kind Body. And I remember talking to the fertility team and like telling them, well, I have vaginismus and I've been very apprehensive because of my vaginismus and like kind of painful for me. And I know I have to do it like almost every day with IVF and then the shots. And so they're like, we can make this as pain-free as possible for you. And I was like, wait, what did you say? And they're like, we can make this as pain-free as I was like, whoa, like it just clicked, like, holy crap, like this is exactly what I told the universe. This is exactly what not having to do any transvaginal ultrasounds until the very end, but they did abdominal scans for me.
What?
The shots were not painful as much for me. Like they told me ways that I can make it like as pain-free as possible. I think the most painful shot, which is the progesterone and oil, they only told me that I need to take that like once or twice a week or something. And so they figured out a way that I wouldn't have to be in pain for too much, which was awesome. Like the whole process was awesome. And so through IVF, I found out that I had low AMH, which means that my egg quality and quantity was decreasing. I was 38 at that time when we started IVF. And so I was 38 at that time when we started IVF. And so they were like, it's natural, you're getting into your 40s and like this happens, it decreases. So if you want to do it, we do it now. And I was like, okay, let's go for it. I had 4 eggs retrieved, which was a little bit sad for me because I was like, okay, how are we going to get fertilized? We had 1 embryo, which was a really good embryo. It was really good. And they transfer that 1 embryo, and now that 1 embryo is my son. So
Oh, I love that.
yeah. And so even the journey with IVF was like not as straightforward and not as like so I remember even through that journey, I was like, I think the one thing throughout my entire fertility journey that I kept telling myself, or I kept hearing at least, was like, just surrender, let go, leave it up
Mhm.
to me, leave it up to me, leave it up. Like I kept hearing that from the universe. And the second I would surrender and let go, like I kept hearing that from the universe. And the second I would surrender and let go. And it's really funny because I just changed my laptop, my screen on my laptop, the wallpaper, and that's exactly what it says. It says, I'll read it to you guys. It says, when I think I surrender more.
Oh, I love that.
It's to because even now, as a new mom, we get caught up with like, oh, he should be at this milestone, or they should be doing this, or why isn't he rolling over? Like, why isn't he like? And so in my head, I'm just like, he's gonna do it at his time. I need
Mhm.
to surrender. And the second I surrender, I see him doing something. I see him doing something else because I'm not so fixated. And I think for me, it's my life lesson to learn is that the second you surrender and you let go of control and fixating on something, it pops up and it happens.
Oh, beautifully said. Beautifully said, because I not only deeply resonate with that statement, but it's very true in my own personal experience. Literally threw away the testing and the micromanagement of my cycle and its quality and all of that type of stuff, which was super hard as a practitioner that analyzes this all day long. That surrender is exactly when my son came in, was that moment where I finally decided, it's like that saying, "Jesus, take the wheel." It's that same
Yeah,
concept of, all right, I surrender, I trust, and trusting that what's meant to happen is supposed to happen. And then it usually happens. It's meant to happen is supposed to happen. And then it usually happens far faster than you would expect.
absolutely. I like it's so funny. And this is why I started off with saying like spirituality isn't about like fixing one thing and moving on to the other. It's a spiral. And like for me, like even though I've learned thing and moving on to the other, it's a spiral. And like for me, like even though I've learned the lesson of letting go of surrendering, it keeps popping up because as humans, it's like we learn a little bit and then it's like, okay, I've learned that. Okay, I'm going to continue. And it's like we fall back, right? We fall back into what we're used to, what our habits are. And then it's like we transform. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you're going to learn things as you go on. It's about being open to learning and changing and transforming. I think the challenge becomes that a lot of us are very scared of change and transformation, that we won't do it and we'll resist it. And the more we resist it and the more that we don't, it's
Mhm.
like you haven't let things come in. Like your energy is so constricted. Like you have to open up, you have to expand. And in order for you to expand, you're going to have to go through things continuously through life.
Mhm. I love your description of healing as a spiral because, like, different life experiences bring up different core woundings for us, right? Like, we all have some level of core wounding and ways that we've adapted to overcome them. And for a lot of women, and I'm saying this just looking at like the people who've come through the door of my clinic, and I see it out of the looking at like the people who've come through the door of my clinic, and I see it out of the world too on a regular basis that, women have collectively learned to adapt by controlling their environment. And the more we control things, the safer we are, right? And the more we control things, the safer we are, right? And this could be something as small as how somebody loads the dishwasher. This could be how somebody broom sweeps the house. I mean, or it could be as big as, managing the household and having certain things done a certain to protect themselves and keep themselves safe with this hypervigilance. So when it comes to the fertility journey, the ability to open, soften, surrender, let go, trust that somebody else, something else is holding you in this and that everything is going to be okay is often a really hard pill for a lot of people to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now we interrupt this episode for another really great announcement. Are you interested in sound healing and wish to use it for self-care in the comfort of your own home? Join me for Rebalance, a sound healing course to help you create balance and equilibrium in your body. And it can leave us feeling unbalanced and out of sorts. Using the power of sound healing at home, give yourself a mini spa treatment and restore the balance that we all crave in our lives. Join me for the upcoming Rebalance class offered in person in Dover, New Hampshire, and online through Zoom, and learn how to balance your stress system and feel ready to take on another day. Details about the upcoming classes are available in the show notes. And now, back to the show.
So I So I think it's because there's so much fear that's instilled throughout the whole process. And that's when I talk about energy being constricted, it comes from that place of being in fear, right? Instead of being in a place of love and compassion. Like we don't really see that in our medical system.
Agreed.
And because of that, like our mindset is very much like, okay, well, if I do this, is this going to work? Like we're constantly thinking of it's not going to work. So what's plan B instead of like, it is going to work and being optimistic, being positive. Like we don't really have that anywhere in our systems of fear mindset that we are living off of. And I feel like that energy from fear is what pushes us to not be open to allowing things to come into our life. Like we don't think of, well, okay, maybe it will happen for me. Like, okay, maybe it didn't happen this time, but maybe next time it will happen. Like we're always like, well, hey, maybe it didn't happen this time, but maybe next time it will happen. Like we're always like, well, it didn't happen, so like it's not gonna happen the next time. But like we're always like very skeptical, right? Like, when is the other shoe gonna drop? Like, when, okay, like this person's really nice, but like, what's their agenda? Like, we're always thinking about it in that way instead of, but like, what's their agenda? Like, we're always thinking about it in that way instead of thinking about it from the perspective of maybe this person is really nice because like that's what you deserve in your life right now.
Mm.
So I feel like when you change that mindset, and that was a really big part of my journey was letting go to change that mindset, and that was a really big part of my journey was letting go of that fear and becoming more in the mindset of love and compassion. And not to say that I was like 100% in this positive mindset, right? It's like I wasn't like spiritually bypassing, like, or I wasn't bypassing my postpartum. I had postpartum anxiety and depression. I was seeing a therapist for all of that. Like, it's not to say that like you're not going to go through that, but it's to say that you're not going to let the fear consume you and dictate your life. You're going to say, okay, fear, I see you. You are in my life, but I'm still going to do the other is I'm ready to receive that part. And so it's like working with the fear as you go through life. And we're not really taught that. We're not taught that in school. We're not taught that from our doctors. We're not taught that anywhere. And I think going back to when I said like motherhood starts from the thought of you becoming pregnant, like this said, like motherhood starts from the thought of you becoming pregnant. Like this is part of it. It's like, what type of thinking are you going to have? What is your mindset? Because that is what you're passing on to your child.
Oh,
That mindset is
100%.
what you're passing on. And so being a conscious parent is also about what is your energy? What is your thought? Being a conscious parent is also about what is your energy? What is your thoughts? How are you living your life holistically? Right. And so that's why I said it's more so of you just being a mom of like, okay, I got to feed my baby. I got to take him to school. I got to do that. It's about who you are.
Mhm.
And when you can become the best version of mom, as however you define it, there's no right or wrong there. That's when you open up the energy, and that's when that baby comes into your life because their soul is already ready for you. I mean, I was watching this video the other day, and from this, like, this kid has already chosen the parents it wants, right? So it's just waiting for you to be ready to receive them. Like
Mhm.
they've already chosen, like, I want this person to be my mom, I want this person to be my dad. But if you're not ready to receive them because you haven't worked up to being at that energy, it's that's the very first part of it, that mindset shift of like getting out of the fear and working with like other sources of energy, like love, compassion, joy.
I love that. What do you do with people? Because I kind of want to go back to a piece that you said at the beginning about doing the shadow work.
Mhm.
So, can you elaborate how you worked with it yourself, but how you work with clients as well?
Yes. So I'll talk about how I worked with it myself, and then I'll go into like how I work with it with my clients. So for me, it was first about bringing awareness. So the very first part is like when you haven't looked at yourself from like when you haven't looked at yourself from the angle of, okay, there are things in me that I need to heal, you just don't know. Like you're not awoke, you're not aware, you just don't know. Like you're just in that state of energy or that state of mindset, like everything's good, I'm good, there's nothing like I need to work on, I'm just out. And it's like, I think about it, it's like you're very robotic. You just wake up, do your routines, and you live life that way. The second you start to realize like there's something else out there in life or in the world that I want to experience that's different. Like I could be doing something differently. Like there has to be something more, right?
Mhm.
You would start to think in my life. And that's where it started for me. And this was way before I even thought of becoming a mom. I was living the routine. I was waking up, going to work, commuting on a train, 2 hours to New York, commuting back. And like my life was very mundane and it was very boring, you know, like, yeah, I was like going out to hang out with my friends and going to parties and things like that. But it was still like, yeah, I was like going out to hang out with my friends and going to parties and things like that. But it was still very boring. Like I was like, there had to be something more. Like I didn't feel that joy or peace from inside. And so I started to really think about that. So that's the first thing. So I started to become very aware. And for that, I started to practice meditation. The meditation really helped me to understand the voice inside of me. So there's two voices inside of you. The first voice is the critic. And that voice I feel is your ego. And that's the one that's telling you, you have to do it this way. You should do it this way. That's where the fear lives. And so I started to realize what that voice is, what that connect with the voice of my soul, your intuition. And I started to write that down. And then I saw like the polar opposite. Oh, well, this is happening with this. And then I started to really connect to the energy of my intuition. Like, because that's what would pull me back to feeling grounded. And so for me, meditation was really about getting back into being myself. And so, very first thing, I would write it down. I did a lot of journaling. I did a lot of like introspection. I would reflect. I would write down like my goals, my intentions. And then I started to really research like, how can I work with this? And so I started to get into learning about like energy work, energy healing, womb clearing, womb healing at a spiritual teacher. She was my spiritual teacher, actually. She's the one who taught me and helped me bring out my gifts. But she, before she became my teacher, she actually was my healer. So she healed my womb space with energy. And she was like teaching me about like how we hold guilt and we hold
Mhm.
shame and we hold all of these things in the womb and like we guilt and we
Mhm.
hold shame and we hold all of these things in the womb. And like we went through everything that I thought of in my whole life about like, intimacy and sex and like all of the things that like obviously like you were saying in health education, it was like shameful, right? And so
Mhm,
it's like I had all of these thoughts inside of me of right? And so
mhm.
it's like I had all of these thoughts inside of me of how it's taboo and like how I shouldn't be talking about it, how I shouldn't be doing it. And there was a lot of shame, how I had shame about my body because I was bullied as a child. Like I had to work through all of that. And so meditation really helped me because it was a place that I could go to where I felt safe. Initially, it didn't, but eventually I got to a place where I felt very safe. I felt this powerful connection to source when I would go into my meditation. So I felt this like beautiful light around me and I was able to like transmute the energy from my trauma into this light, teaching them how to bring the awareness. So we talked through like, okay, what are some things that like you're going through right now? And I'll just like have them freestyle talk about it and give them a few journal prompts to go through. I feel like meditation can be traumatic for some people because just sitting there can be hard. And so what I always do is like do a guided meditation with them where it's like I'm really talking a lot and I just have them close their eyes and like see if anything comes up. And if not, then we just break it and we do breath work or we'll do EFT tapping. And that kind of helps to bring the awareness of like what's going on and then healing it with like these mindfulness modalities or if they're going on and then healing it with like these mindfulness modalities or if there's like other energy healing that I can do where I can remove the energy from there and transmute it to something else. I'll dive into that with that.
I love that. Everything you're talking about is so critically important. I talk to my clients quite a lot about using critically important. I talk to my clients quite a lot about using these kinds of tools, but I love that this is the core of how you're working with your clients because I've seen it also equally as strongly as you have in your practice that being able to acknowledge places that need some light shown upon them can be one of the hardest steps in the entire conversation because none of us want to admit that we have flaws or things we need to work on or anything like that and being able to own the shadow. My mentor has said quite often, and it's really true, when we're able to take a look at some of the things that don't feel really good to us and we start getting curious
Mhm,
around, well, why does this not feel good? What is it that caused me to feel that way in the first place? And, you mentioned into the stories that we tell ourselves and then that disconnect between that and our intuition. I did a podcast episode a little while back and it was talking about the inner critic.
mhm,
And so if you haven't listened to that episode, I would highly check it out because it dovetails beautifully with what we're talking about because that inner critic can be a real asshole and it
mhm,
tells us all kinds of things that aren't true. And for some reason in our culture, we have given credence to the fact that the ego brain is far superior to the body wisdom. Some people think that the ego brain is far superior to the body wisdom. Some people struggle to even tap into the body wisdom because we are so focused on the intellect of the mind. Well, if you think about situations that make you uncomfortable, your body will send off like flares and bell up. So
mhm,
the brain really, I mean, it's smart, it's great, we need it, but your body wisdom never lies to you. And your
mhm,
body wisdom always tells you what it is that you need to know and know from the very beginning. We're just not taught to trust that voice, that feeling, that gut sensation that we get when it's like, "Oof, I don't know if this is a good fit for me," or, "Ooh, this is not a side of myself I really wanna look at right now." And usually it's the parts where you dig into some of the things you don't really wanna look at is where the deepest healing happens. Some of the things you don't really wanna look at is where the deepest healing happens. I know that same situation in my case. I had a huge amount of spiritual growth the year before I connected with and got pregnant with my son. And, when we have these moments where we can open and allow and get curious about the uncomfortable or shadowy sides of things,
Mhm.
where we come out on the other end, we move through the world differently. We literally resonate differently. What we attract with our new freak totally different.
Mhm.
And I, like you, had an 8-year journey to conceive my son. And, I truly believe that I needed to rise to the frequency that he was holding in
Mhm.
order for him to come in.
Yep, absolutely. And I feel like that
For him to come in.
Yep, absolutely. And I feel like that's something that's not shared with people. We
Mhm.
don't talk about that. We don't talk about energy in the way that it is. Everything is energy. Your thoughts are energy. Every single part of you is energy. Everything around it's energy. Like we're attracting things, don't realize that because we're not taught this, right? As you said, we're taught like become smart. Intellect's very important. If you can think it, like you can do it. You can like become book smart and you can, get whatever job you want. And that's how you can, rise into becoming successful. But like that could be part of it. That could be part of and I
Mhm.
honestly feel like the secret that everything is energy is not shared because the people that were in control didn't want to lose their control, right? And so
I'm
now
so glad you said that.
now that
Say it louder for the people in the back.
the people
For the people in the back.
the people it's the truth. And I feel like that
It
was
is.
part of my journey as well, learning that, right? Learning that for a very long time, I was tapped into this mindset of like, I need to do things in a certain way, but I was being controlled to think that from
Yes.
what I was eating, but I was being controlled to think that from
Yes.
what I was eating to what I was putting in my body to the medicines, to the system. Like when you actually think about it from that perspective, you're like, holy shit. Like I was just tapped into the society that was trying to control me and not allow me to grow and to empower others. Like, and to empower others. Like they were
Mhm.
just trying to be in the power. And like empowerment is not about that. It's about you supporting somebody else and letting them find their own power so that they can rise. Because if they're rising and I'm rising, we're rising the consciousness of this world, which means that we're all rising together. It's not about a lot more people are talking about it now, which I'm very happy about. But like if you're not tapped into that, that's like the first part of awareness that you become like, you start to, like, think about it and, like, everything starts to open up for you in that realm of, like, "Oh, like, why is that that way?" Like, "Oh, okay, like, I don't have to do that that way. Okay." And I also feel like a lot of the, like, holistic approaches to fertility, acupuncture, herbal medicine, like, all of these things are kind of, like, on the side, like, nobody wants to talk about it because they just want you to tap into this medical system that's pumping money into the country. Like when you go through it, and I don't want to go dumping money into the country. Like when you go through it, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, so I'll stop this. But when you go through it, it's like mind boggling. Like,
Yeah.
holy shit, like we're just a system in all of this, or we're just a cog in the system, right? Like we're just from a very young age taught that take this drug will make you feel better, but we're not take this drug will make you feel better, but we're not feeling better. And then we're just constantly going through the system of like, okay, well, I need health insurance because I need the health insurance to pay for this medicine, then I need the health
Mhm.
insurance to pay for the doctor. And we're doing the same things, but we're getting worse. Our health is not getting better. Then on top of that, what we're feeding our body is a whole other thing. So this
Ow! Yes. Dang it, sister. Oh my gosh, I love this. So again, now everybody listening, can you see why I wanted her on the podcast? It's so true though. And I feel like a part 2 is fun because I feel like that's a really big part of this. It's a really big focal point in my practice because we have been kind of indoctrinated into this idea that, well, what the doctor says goes. And a lot of times we have that, and maybe this is where we go with that conversation the next time, right? But we have that go with that conversation the next time, right? But we have that friction where the body intuition goes, I don't know if I believe that. And then the brain goes, oh shit, well, they're the doctor. So I probably should believe this.
Mhm.
Right. That's the logical conclusion is that I should believe this. But then the body intuition is going, I don't know about. I don't know about that. Like, I feel fine, like, or I don't feel fine. And you don't seem to think that there isn't anything going on here. Like,
Mhm,
I had this experience with an ultrasound with my son. Like, they were
mhm,
telling me there was something wrong with his heart. And my body kept saying, no, he's fine. He's totally fine. Fine. He's totally fine. Right.
yeah,
So it's like your body knows, your body knowing is so incredibly powerful. And one of the things that I'm a really big advocate for, and it's part of the reason why Reproductive Rebel exists, is I want people to know that they have choices. Because where we are essentially told that we are deficient somehow, right? Our body can't do a thing and it needs to be quote unquote fixed by the doctor or the meds or the whatever, right? Instead of being able to actually trust that our body can handle healing itself. And there are cases where intervention is needed, sure. But is it as much as the current medical model wants you to believe? No. Like, your body is brilliant and it knows
mhm,
what it knows, right? And so, there's a reason why you get that uts in your stomach when you're having a
mhm,
conversation about something with a that uts in your stomach when you're having a
mhm,
conversation about something with a doctor because it doesn't feel aligned with what you feel on the inside of your body, right? So when I sit down with clients, I always have those kinds of conversations where it's like, okay, so here's details about the procedure that it is that they're talking to you about. Here's what your details about the procedure that it is that they're talking to you about. Here's what your possible outcomes would look like. Here's what you can do that is natural, non-invasive, blah, 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 so that you can make a choice that feels aligned to you. That is
totally,
truly empowerment.
absolutely. And I think that
Empowerment.
absolutely. And I think that going back, because I went on a tangent about like being controlled, what I was trying to say about intellect was this, like, we're taught that our mind is so powerful and we're not taught about our soul, but our soul has lived lifetimes, eons, maybe even, right? Like, and comprehend,
Mhm.
right? So our mind is like a computer. It needs to be told what to do. Something is telling it what to do, right? And so going back to what I was saying, it was being programmed in a certain way, but that doesn't mean that it can't be reprogrammed to something else.
Mm.
And when you reprogram it from your soul, from the wisdom that is to really open up for you. When we talk about, like, I was watching this other video the other day about synchronicities. Like, we think that, okay, well, when we do something, like more synchronicities will happen for us, but it's not that. Like, synchronicities are always happening. It's just you're becoming more aware to it, right?
Mhm.
Same thing with like the things we're calling in. It's not about like, okay, well, now manifesting for you. It's just you're becoming more aware of it. And so it's coming into your reality because you've changed the way that you're looking at it. Your consciousness has changed.
Yeah.
And when we think about it that way, it's like, so the mind is actually being formed in different ways. Like the intellect is being formed in different ways. It's not like I'm just getting that. Like the intellect is being formed in different ways. It's not like I'm just getting that from one place. Something is telling it what to do,
Mhm.
right? So if something is telling it what to do, that means that it can't be the supreme power. And so it's like, okay, well, what is the supreme power? Well, soul, because soul is connected to source, and that's where the supreme power is coming. And we all have that. We all are co-creators of our life with source. And so anything that you can dream of, think of, you're able to bring that into your life, but we're not taught that in that way, right? And so like that's where that empowerment really comes from. It's like even when doctors are telling you something, we think that, oh, we can't challenge them. Experience with my son, I had the same experience when I was going through pregnancy with a few things, like challenge it. If your
Mhm.
body is telling you, challenge it. Your intuition knows a lot more than whatever your mind is going to tell you or whatever that doctor is going to tell you. The doctor is looking at it from their own data, their own perspective, but they don't know your body the way that you do. Their own perspective, but they don't know your body the way that you do,
Mm.
right? And
Yes.
so you need to be an advocate for yourself. Nobody else can be an advocate for you. Like if you're not comfortable with doing something or you feel like from your body, you feel like, oh, well, this isn't right for me, speak up, speak up. And maybe even on me, speak up, speak up. And maybe even on that journey, you might feel like, okay, I don't want to do this. And you ask the doctor, you ask somebody else to give you a little bit more understanding of it. And you start to realize, like, okay, maybe I was just scared of this. Maybe I need to do it this way. But like your body will be able to tell you the route that you want to go, right? But like your body will be able to tell you the route that you want to go. Your mind will never be able to tell you that. Like your mind is only going to be like a computer. It's like if you work with like AI or something, like you have to type the exact thing in the computer to get what you want back. That is how your
Yes.
mind is. Your body is not like that. Your body is on when you tap into it.
I love that. Beautiful, beautiful connection. I love that. I honestly, I could talk to you for hours
Yeah.
because
Me too.
I would love to do a part two if you
Let's
are
do it.
open to it, my friend. So I want to make sure that people can find you and your
So my Instagram is pretty much where I hang out a lot. It's called Inner Serenity LC. I post a lot of cool videos there and like stories, and I'm like very active on Instagram. I also have my own podcast, which Adrienne was on. It's called Soul Diaries, Discover Your Inner Serenity. And those are pretty much the two places. Everything else.
you so much for your time today. And I'm so grateful for this conversation and all of the wisdom that you shared with everybody today. And we will definitely get together for a part two.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was beautiful.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at Moon Essence Me. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.